The terminal at Pearson International Airport thrummed with the rhythm of modern travel announcements echoing through the cavernous space. The shuffle of suitcases and the murmur of conversations blending into a kind of organized chaos. Among the sea of hurried passengers, Camille Carter moved with deliberate grace. Dressed in a tailored black blazer, her silver hair swept neatly back. She carried a sleek, metallic briefcase that caught the light with each step. Her face, calm and composed, bore the quiet authority of someone accustomed to responsibility. People noticed her, how could they not? But they rarely approached. Camille had cultivated an air of quiet self-reliance, honed over decades in high-pressure environments. Her confidence, though, didn't mean she was unaware. She saw the sidelong glances, the momentary pauses as strangers tried to make sense of her presence. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. But Camille had lived long enough to recognize it for what it was. As she approached the gate for her flight to Washington, D.C., Camille paused, surveying the scene. Two lines had formed, one for economy and another for first-class passengers. She stepped into the first-class line, her grip steady on the handle of her briefcase. The gate agent, a young woman with a crisp uniform and a polished smile, greeted her with a practiced politeness. "Good evening, ma'am. May I see your boarding pass?" Camille handed over her ticket and ID with a faint smile. The agent's eyes flicked to the briefcase, lingering just a fraction too long. Her expression remained professional. But there was something else there. Unspoken but unmistakable. A hesitation. "Ah. Thank you. Enjoy your flight," the agent said, returning the documents. Camille caught the pause, as she always did, but chose to move on. She had seen it too many times to let it affect her now. Inside the cabin, the contrast was striking. Plush leather seats, warm lighting, and the faint hum of conversation created a bubble of comfort that stood in stark relief to the bustling terminal. Camille found her seat near the front, storing the briefcase carefully in the overhead compartment. Her movements were deliberate, her demeanor calm. But there was a purposefulness in how she locked the compartment, a small act of assurance. A flight attendant appeared beside her, her smile overly bright. "Can I help you with that?" the woman asked, her gaze fixed on the briefcase. "No, thank you," Camille replied evenly, her voice polite but firm. The flight attendant lingered, her curiosity poorly masked. "Is there anything valuable in there?" "It looks heavy." Camille's brow lifted slightly, but her tone remained measured. "Just personal items." The response should have sufficed. But it didn't. The attendant nodded, her smile faltering, and walked away. Camille noticed how she whispered to another crew member, her gestures small but deliberate, their glances shifting toward Camille's seat. It was subtle. But then again, it always was. Settling into her seat, Camille opened a leather-bound notebook. The soft rustle of the pages a quiet comfort. She skimmed through notes she had jotted down earlier, her pen hovering as her mind turned to the speech she would soon deliver in Washington. It was a privilege. She reminded herself a rare opportunity to stand among peers and be recognized for a lifetime of service. And yet, moments like this reminded her of the work still to be done. Across the aisle, the flight attendant had not let go of her unease. Camille felt the weight of her gaze, the whisper of unspoken questions hanging in the air. Years in the intelligence community had sharpened her instincts. She could sense when she was being watched. Her training told her to ignore it, to focus on the task at hand. But her humanity made it impossible to dismiss entirely. The plane began to fill with passengers. the quiet shuffle of boarding adding to the cabin's muted hum. Camille leaned back, allowing herself a brief moment of reprieve. She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly as the engines roared to life. For now, she would rest. For now, she would ignore the whispers, the glances, and the questions that hung unspoken in the air. But deep down, Camille knew the flight would not be as uneventful as she had hoped. It never was. The hum of the engines settled into a steady rhythm as the plane leveled off. Its ascent complete, Camille Carter opened her eyes, glancing briefly at the flight status display on the monitor above her seat. 2 hours to Washington, D.C. She shifted slightly in her seat, the cool leather pressing against her back. Though her body was at rest, her mind remained quietly alert, a habit she had never quite shaken. Across the aisle, the flight attendant, her name tag read Diane, stood by the galley. Camille noticed her out of the corner of her eye, her movements brisk yet purposeful. Diane wasn't busy with service preparations. Instead, she was watching Camille, her gaze lingering just long enough to be noticeable. In her hands, Diane toyed with a coffee stirrer, her fingers fidgeting in a rhythm that betrayed unease. It wasn't overt, nothing that could be labeled as hostile or even impolite. But Camille had lived a lifetime of reading between the lines, deciphering the quiet language of bias. It was there in the way Diane spoke to her earlier, her smile tight and her questions veiled. It was there in how she now whispered to a colleague, a younger man who glanced briefly in Camille's direction before returning to his task. "Something about her doesn't feel right," Diane said in a hushed voice. "That case, have you ever seen anything like it? And she's so guarded." Evan, her colleague, raised an eyebrow but didn't look up from the stack of trays he was arranging. "She's a first-class passenger. They bring all kinds of stuff. Maybe it's business." "It's not just the case," Diane insisted, her voice tinged with an edge she tried to suppress. "Did you see how she locked it? Like she was hiding something." Evan sighed, finally meeting Diane's gaze. "You're reading into it. Just let it go." But Diane couldn't let it go. Her eyes flicked back toward Camille, who sat quietly with her notebook open. To an untrained eye, Camille might have appeared lost in thought, perhaps jotting down ideas for a meeting or correspondence. But Diane didn't see calmness, she saw calculation. To her, Camille's composed demeanor wasn't professionalism but secrecy. Diane turned and made her way toward the cockpit, the small unease in her chest now growing into a quiet storm. She knocked lightly on the door, and the co-pilot, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, opened it partway, his headset askew. "What is it?" he asked, his tone brusque but not unkind. "It's the woman in seat 2A," Diane began, lowering her voice. "She's carrying a briefcase, sleek, metallic, locked, and she's acting unusual. I think we should alert someone." The co-pilot frowned, glancing toward the cabin as if trying to identify Camille from afar. "Unusual how?" "You know." Diane hesitated, her words faltering under his scrutiny. "She's different." The co-pilot leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "Different isn't a reason to report someone mid-flight. If there's no immediate threat, we leave it alone. File something after we land if you're still concerned." But Diane started, only to be cut off by a raised hand. "Unless you have something concrete." "Diane." "Let it go," he said, closing the door firmly. Diane returned to the galley, her frustration simmering just below the surface. She glanced once more at Camille, whose focus hadn't wavered. To Diane, that composure now seemed almost defiant. As though Camille knew she was being watched and didn't care. It was maddening. She exchanged a glance with Evan, who simply shook his head, a silent plea for her to move on. But Diane couldn't. In her seat, Camille was far from oblivious. She felt Diane's eyes on her. The whispers that didn't quite fade into the background noise of the cabin. She could sense the discomfort radiating from the galley. Experience had taught her to distinguish between simple curiosity and something more pointed. This was the latter. Her notebook lay open in her lap, the ink of her pen gliding smoothly across the page. She wasn't writing anything important, just fragments of thoughts. A habit she'd developed to center herself in moments like this. Her calm outward demeanor wasn't an accident. It was a choice. A quiet assertion of control in a world that often sought to strip it from her. The tension between Camille and Diane remained unspoken. But it was palpable. Lingering like a shadow across the cabin. To most passengers, everything appeared normal. The gentle clinking of trays. The low hum of conversation. The faint smell of coffee wafting from the galley, all the hallmarks of an uneventful flight. But the reality, as Camille knew all too well, was far more complex. This wasn't about a briefcase. It never had been. It was about what that briefcase represented. What Camille represented. To someone like Diane. To someone who couldn't quite articulate their discomfort without exposing the bias that lay beneath it. As the flight continued, Camille closed her notebook and leaned back in her seat. She allowed her eyes to flutter shut. But her mind remained alert. Her instincts finely tuned. Diane's unease would not dissipate. Of that Camille was certain. The question was not if Diane would act on it, but when. The cabin lights dimmed. And the plane flew on, cutting through the night sky. For now, Camille rested, preparing herself for whatever was to come. She had learned long ago to expect turbulence not just in the air, but in life. The plane touched down at Washington Dulles International Airport with a gentle jolt. The tires meeting the runway with practiced precision. For most passengers, it was an ordinary moment, an uneventful end to a routine flight. Camille Carter, seated calmly in 2A, glanced out the window at the glow of the city lights. A quiet sense of relief washing over her. She was nearly home. But then, a voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you remain seated after landing as we handle a minor security matter. Thank you for your cooperation. Camille's brow furrowed, the words pulling her sharply into the present. She cast a discreet glance around the cabin. Confused murmurs rippled through the rows. Passengers exchanging puzzled looks. Most dismissed the announcement as something trivial. But Camille knew better. Years of navigating delicate situations had taught her that minor rarely meant insignificant. Her senses sharpened as the plane came to a stop at the gate. From her window, she noticed the flashes of red and blue lights reflecting on the terminal windows. Emergency vehicles. Their presence a jarring contrast to the calm inside the cabin. Camille inhaled slowly, steadying herself. The cabin door opened, and the sound of boots echoed down the jet bridge. Uniformed officers stepped into the plane, their presence immediately commanding attention. The quiet murmur of passengers fell silent, tension settling over the cabin like a heavy fog. Passenger in seat 2A. Please remain seated, one officer announced. His voice firm but neutral. Camille remained still, her expression composed. Her hands rested lightly on her lap, her posture as upright as ever. The officer's words confirmed what she had already suspected. This was about her. Passengers turned to look. Their curiosity piqued. Some exchanged knowing glances. their assumptions filling the gaps in their understanding. Others whispered behind hands, their words barely audible but unmistakable in tone. Camille could feel their eyes on her. Each glance a silent judgment, a quiet indictment. The lead officer approached her, his demeanor professional but cautious. "Ma'am, we need you to step off the plane with us." Camille met his gaze, her voice calm and measured. "May I ask what this is about?" "It's a routine matter," he replied, his words carefully chosen. "Please come with us." Routine. Camille almost allowed herself a bitter smile at the word. But she chose restraint. Without a word, she reached for her carry-on bag and stood, her movements deliberate and unhurried. The metallic briefcase in the overhead compartment caught the light as she retrieved it, the quiet click of the latch breaking the heavy silence. As she walked down the aisle, flanked by officers, the whispers grew louder. Concern flickered across some faces, but others held only curiosity or thinly veiled judgment. Camille kept her chin high, her steps steady. She had no intention of giving the situation more power than it deserved. At the front of the cabin, she caught a glimpse of Diane standing near the galley. The flight attendant's expression was a mix of smugness and uncertainty, her eyes darting away as Camille passed. It was a small moment, but it spoke volumes. Camille was led into a private room in the terminal, the sterile walls and harsh lighting making the space feel colder than it was. A group of officers stood waiting, along with 2 airline security personnel. The lead officer gestured toward a table in the center of the room. "Place the case on the table." "Ma'am," he instructed. Camille complied, setting the briefcase down with care. She straightened, her hands clasped in front of her, her composure unbroken. "What exactly is going on here?" she asked, her tone polite but firm. "We received a report about your luggage," the lead officer replied, avoiding her gaze. "We need to inspect it." "A report?" Camille repeated, her voice steady but with an unmistakable edge. "From whom?" "That's not relevant right now," he said, his discomfort evident. "Please unlock the case." Camille studied him for a moment, her silence heavy with unspoken meaning. Then, with a nod, she entered the code and released the latches. The lid lifted smoothly, revealing the contents within. The room fell silent. Nestled inside the briefcase, cradled in a protective velvet lining, was the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The golden emblem gleamed under the fluorescent lights, accompanied by an official certificate bearing the signature of the President of the United States. It was a symbol of honor, of years of service and sacrifice. The officers stared, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief. One of them muttered under his breath, "Is this real?" "Yes," Camille said evenly, breaking the silence. "It is. I received it yesterday for my contributions to national security." The lead officer stepped back, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Ma'am, we didn't realize." "No," Camille interrupted, her tone calm but cutting. "You didn't. You made an assumption. And because of that, you've not only humiliated me in front of a plane full of people, but you've also delayed my journey for no reason." Diane entered the room, her presence summoned by one of the officers. When she saw the contents of the briefcase, her face went pale. The lead officer turned to her, his voice tight with frustration. "Is this the passenger you reported?" Diane nodded weakly, unable to meet Camille's gaze. I thought." "You thought wrong," Camille said, her voice steady. "And now, here we are." The room was thick with unease, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone but Camille. She closed the briefcase with a soft click and straightened, her dignity intact despite the ordeal. The officers stumbled through apologies, their words fumbling and insincere. Camille offered none in return. Instead, she walked out of the room with her head held high, her steps measured, her resolve unshaken. As she re-entered the terminal, the noise of the crowd swirled around her, a sharp contrast to the sterile quiet of the interrogation room. A young black girl, no older than 10, stood nearby with her mother, her wide eyes fixed on Camille. There was admiration in her gaze, a kind of quiet wonder that made Camille pause. She offered the girl a small nod and a soft smile, her heart steadying. If nothing else, this moment was a reminder of why she carried herself the way she did. For the ones who would come after her, she would remain strong. Her journey home had been interrupted, but Camille Carter knew that her fight, one much larger than herself, was far from over. The ride from Dulles International Airport to Camille Carter's townhouse in Washington, D.C., was silent except for the muted hum of traffic. The city lights blurred past the windows of the car, their glow softening the edges of an evening marked by confrontation. Camille sat in the back seat, her silver briefcase resting beside her, its metallic sheen catching the occasional flicker of passing headlights. She leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes for a moment. The events of the evening replayed in her mind, not with anger, but with a quiet clarity. She had faced worse situations in her years of service, moments where the stakes were far higher. And yet, this felt different. It wasn't about danger or a mission gone awry. It was personal in a way that stung deeper than she wanted to admit. It wasn't the first time she had been judged for how she looked rather than who she was. Camille knew it wouldn't be the last. That knowledge was both exhausting and familiar, a weight she had learned to carry without letting it bend her. But tonight, the weight felt heavier than usual. She let out a slow breath, grounding herself in the rhythm of the road. When the car pulled up to her townhouse, Camille thanked the driver and stepped out. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves. She paused on the steps of her home, her hand resting on the polished brass railing. The sight of her front door, a sturdy, unassuming thing painted a deep navy blue, offered a sense of solace. It was a place that belonged entirely to her, a space where she could leave the world's expectations at the threshold. Inside, the familiar scent of lavender greeted her, the soft glow of a single lamp illuminating the living room. Camille placed the briefcase on the desk in her study, its presence almost incongruous in the warm, personal space. She sat down in the chair, her hands resting on the smooth wood of the desk. For a moment, she simply stared at the briefcase, its surface reflecting the light in muted silver tones. It was ironic, she thought, that this symbol of honor, of recognition for her years of service and sacrifice, had been the very thing that sparked suspicion. The Medal of Freedom was a testament to her contributions, yet it had done nothing to shield her from the assumptions that had followed her onto that plane. Camille wasn't naive enough to believe it ever could. Her phone buzzed on the desk, the screen lighting up with a familiar name, Director James Preston. She hesitated for a moment before answering, her voice steady despite the fatigue she felt. "Camille," Preston said, his tone warm but tinged with concern. "I just got off the phone with someone at Dulles. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she replied, her words measured. It was an inconvenience, nothing more. "Inconvenience?" Preston's voice sharpened. "They detained you over a briefcase containing the nation's highest civilian honor." "That's more than an inconvenience, Camille,"
It's an embarrassment for them. Not you.
Camille leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting toward the window. The city outside was quiet, its streets bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. I appreciate your concern, she said.
But I want to handle this my way.
There was a pause on the other end of the line.
When Preston spoke again.
His voice was softer.
Understood. Just know that if you need support, I'll make sure you have it. Thank you, Camille said. Meaning it.
After the call ended, she sat in silence for a while, the weight of the day settling over her.
She wasn't angry. Not in the way people expected.
Camille had learned long ago that anger, though justified, often did more to exhaust than empower her. What she felt was something quieter, a resolve that had grown stronger with each passing year.
This wasn't just about her,
she reminded herself.
It never had been.
The assumptions that had led to her briefcase being singled out, to her being escorted off the plane, were part of something much larger, something that countless others experienced every day in ways both small and profound.
Camille had been given a platform,
a voice that carried weight, and she knew she had a responsibility to use it.
The next morning,
Camille awoke to a pale sunlight filtering through the curtains of her bedroom. The events of the previous night lingered in her mind,
but they no longer felt as heavy. She dressed simply. A navy blouse and gray slacks.
Her movements deliberate and unhurried.
Before leaving the house,
she opened the briefcase one last time, letting her eyes rest on the metal nestled within.
It was a reminder,
not just of her achievements but of the battles she had fought and those she had yet to face.
By mid-morning,
she found herself in the sleek,
glass-walled headquarters of Global Wings Airlines in downtown Washington. Camille had spent the early hours drafting a report, detailing every misstep during the incident and outlining recommendations for systemic changes.
She had not contacted the press or sought public attention.
That wasn't her style.
Her goal wasn't to shame but to spark a necessary conversation. The receptionist greeted her with a polite smile, her demeanor shifting slightly when Camille introduced herself. It was subtle the way her eyes widened ever so slightly, her posture straightening, but Camille noticed. She always noticed.
Please have a seat, the receptionist said. Mr. Harrison will be with you shortly. 15 minutes later, Camille sat across from the airline's chief operating officer, Mr. Harrison, in a spacious conference room. The man, tall and impeccably dressed,
radiated a discomfort that he tried to mask with contrition.
Miss Carter, Harrison began,
his voice careful. Let me start by saying how deeply sorry we are for what happened.
This incident does not reflect our values as an airline. Camille studied him for a moment,
letting the silence stretch just long enough to make him shift uncomfortably. Your values may not reflect it, she said finally,
her tone calm. But your actions did. This wasn't an isolated incident, Mr. Harrison.
It was the result of a culture that allows unchecked bias to go unchallenged.
Harrison nodded slowly, his expression tight.
We take allegations of bias very seriously.
The flight attendant in question has already been placed on administrative leave. That's not enough, Camille said,
her voice steady but firm.
This isn't about one person. It's about a system. What are you going to do to ensure this doesn't happen again?
Harrison hesitated, clearly unprepared for the directness of her question.
Camille slid the report across the table, her movements precise.
This outlines the steps you need to take, she said.
Mandatory bias training for all employees.
Clear protocols for handling security concerns.
Accountability measures for incidents like this. These aren't suggestions, Mr. Harrison. They're necessities. The man flipped through the report, his expression growing more serious with each page. "This is thorough," he said finally. "It has to be," Camille replied. "Because if it isn't addressed, I will ensure it reaches the people who can force your hand. And trust me, they'll be less patient than I am." As Camille left the building, she felt a quiet sense of resolve. Change wouldn't come easily. She knew that. But she had planted a seed. Whether it grew or withered under scrutiny was now up to them. For Camille, the fight was far from over. But for the first time since the plane had landed, she allowed herself to feel the smallest flicker of hope. The quiet of Camille Carter's townhouse was a sanctuary after days of noise and confrontation. Outside, the steady rhythm of a late autumn rain tapped against the windows, the sound soft and constant, like an old friend. Camille sat at her desk, her silver briefcase open in front of her. The Presidential Medal of Freedom glimmered faintly under the study lamp's glow, its golden surface almost defiant against the muted grays of the overcast morning. Her mind wandered, not to the medal itself, but to the events that had surrounded it: the flight, the suspicion, the whispers. These moments had followed her throughout her life, shadows that appeared in the most unexpected places. She had learned to navigate them, to carry herself with dignity and calm. But their persistence was tiring. The briefcase was a symbol of her achievements. Yet it had become a focal point for assumptions she could not control. That tension, the gap between who she was and how others saw her, was a burden she had carried for too long. The phone on her desk buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw the words "Office of Senator Michael Hargrave." Her hand hovered for a moment before picking up the call. "Ms. Carter," said a voice on the other end, warm but professional. "This is Catherine Davis, Senator Hargrave's assistant. The senator would like to meet with you regarding your recent experience with Global Wings Airlines. He believes it could serve as a powerful example for a bill he's been drafting. Would you be available to meet this afternoon?" Camille considered the request. She wasn't one for the spotlight, preferring her work to speak for itself. But this wasn't just about her, it was about something much larger. "I'll be there," she said finally. Underscore 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 underscore. By mid-afternoon, Camille found herself in Senator Hargrave's stately office on Capitol Hill. The room was a blend of history and authority, its dark wood paneling and framed photographs of landmark legislation exuding a quiet gravity. Hargrave himself was an imposing figure, tall, silver-haired, with a voice that carried the weight of conviction. He greeted Camille with a firm handshake, his eyes bright with respect. "Ms. Carter," he began, motioning for her to take a seat across from his desk. "It's an honor to meet you. I've followed your career for years. Your dedication and composure in the face of challenges are remarkable." "Thank you, Senator," Camille replied, her tone even. "I appreciate your kind words." Hargrave leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "Your report on the incident with Global Wings crossed my desk last week. It's thorough. Painfully so. This isn't the first time I've seen something like this. But your story carries a unique weight. It highlights a problem we've been trying to address for years." Camille tilted her head slightly. "And what problem is that, Senator?" "Systemic bias," he said plainly. "Not just in the airline industry, but across so many facets of our society. What happened to you isn't isolated, it's part of a pattern. And patterns like this require bold action to change."
He slid a folder across the desk. Its label reading Passenger Dignity Act. Camille opened it, her eyes scanning the pages. The bill outlined measures to mandate comprehensive bias training for all airline personnel, establish clear protocols for handling security concerns, and create federal oversight for incidents of discrimination. This is ambitious, she said, her voice calm but tinged with cautious approval. It has to be, Hargrave replied. But ambition isn't enough. A bill like this needs momentum. And for that, it needs voices like yours. I'd like you to testify at the upcoming hearing. Camille looked up, meeting his gaze. Testify, she repeated. Hargrave nodded. Your experience embodies exactly why this legislation is necessary. Your voice could make all the difference. Camille hesitated. She had spent much of her career working behind the scenes, letting her actions speak louder than words. But this was different. This wasn't about a single flight or a single person, it was about a culture that needed to be challenged. I'll do it, she said finally, her resolve firm. Underscore 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 underscore. The days leading up to the hearing were a blur of preparation. Camille worked late into the night, drafting her testimony with the same precision she had brought to her years of service. Each word was chosen carefully, each sentence crafted to cut through the noise and get to the heart of the issue. When the morning of the hearing arrived, Camille found herself standing before a packed chamber. The room buzzed with anticipation, reporters clicking away on cameras, and spectators whispering among themselves. Senator Hargrave opened the proceedings with a fiery speech, laying bare the systemic issues the bill sought to address. Then, it was Camille's turn. She approached the witness stand with her silver briefcase in hand, its presence a quiet statement of the journey that had brought her here. Dressed in a simple navy suit, her posture was as upright and composed as ever. She placed the briefcase on the table beside her and began. Good morning, she said, her voice steady, carrying just enough weight to silence the room. My name is Camille Carter. I am here today not as a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, not as a former intelligence officer, but as a woman who was judged unfairly because of how I look. The silence in the room deepened as Camille recounted her experience on the flight. Her words were measured, devoid of embellishment. Yet they painted a vivid picture. She spoke of the whispers, the glances, the quiet indignities that so often went unnoticed by those who weren't subjected to them. And then she spoke of the larger issue, the systems and biases that allowed such moments to persist. This is not just my story, she concluded. It is the story of countless others who face these challenges every day. We have the power to change that. And we must. The room remained quiet for a moment before the sound of applause rippled through the chamber. Camille stepped back, her testimony complete, and returned to her seat, her heart steady despite the weight of the moment. The fight for the Passenger Dignity Act had only just begun. But Camille knew she had done her part to set it in motion. As she left the hearing that day, she felt a quiet resolve settle over her. The path ahead would not be easy, but it was one she was willing to walk for herself, and for everyone who came after her. The hearing chamber lingered in Camille Carter's mind long after she had left it. The questions from lawmakers, the weight of the public's gaze, and the ripple of applause following her testimony had all been part of a larger narrative, a story far greater than her own. She had always preferred to operate in the background. But now, her presence at the forefront felt unavoidable. The stakes demanded it.
The morning after the hearing,
Camille sat at her kitchen table, her silver briefcase resting nearby. A mug of coffee steamed in front of her,
untouched.
As she sifted through messages on her phone,
most were words of encouragement, friends, colleagues, and strangers expressing their admiration for her poise and clarity.
But scattered among them were messages of resistance, voices questioning her intentions,
dismissing her experience,
or accusing her of seeking attention.
She read them with a steady calm. These reactions weren't new to her. What was new, however, was the public platform she now occupied.
The personal had become political in a way she had not fully anticipated. Her thoughts were interrupted by a call from Senator Hargrave's office. Catherine Davis's voice was brisk but warm.
"Ms. Carter. Good morning. The senator wanted me to thank you again for your testimony yesterday. It's already making waves." "I'm glad to hear that," Camille replied.
"But waves are just the beginning."
"What's next?"
"There's resistance."
"As expected," Catherine admitted. "Some members of Congress are pushing back, saying the bill is too punitive and burdensome for airlines. Lobbyists are making noise too.
But the senator is determined to press forward.
He'd like to strategize with you. Are you available this afternoon?" Camille agreed. And by mid-afternoon, she was seated in Hargrave's office once more. This time, the atmosphere was different. The initial introductions had given way to the quiet urgency of planning. The senator laid out the opposition's arguments, costs, feasibility,
the usual refrains used to stall progress.
Camille listened,
her expression thoughtful but resolute.
"They're clinging to convenience," she said finally. "But convenience isn't an excuse for inequity.
If we're asking airlines to treat all passengers with dignity, and they consider that a burden, then we've already identified the problem."
Hargrave nodded. "Exactly.
That's why we need to reframe this.
This isn't a punishment, it's an opportunity for the industry to lead by example. To prove that equity and excellence aren't mutually exclusive."
The senator's words resonated with Camille. She thought back to the countless moments in her own career when she had been underestimated,
doubted,
or judged, only to prove her worth through quiet but undeniable results. If she could do that in her own life,
perhaps the industry could be pushed to do the same.
Underscore 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 underscore.
In the weeks that followed, Camille found herself navigating a world she had rarely entered before, the intersection of advocacy and policy. She met with airline executives, civil rights leaders, and government officials, each conversation carrying the weight of her mission.
She spoke plainly but firmly, her voice cutting through the noise with the same measured precision she had employed throughout her career.
Not every meeting was fruitful. At one gathering with a coalition of airline representatives, Camille faced thinly veiled skepticism. One executive, a man with a polished demeanor and an air of authority, dismissed the bill as unnecessary. "Our airlines already prioritize customer service," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Additional regulations won't solve what you're describing. These incidents are isolated."
Camille's gaze was steady as she responded.
"If they were truly isolated, I wouldn't be here.
And neither would this legislation."
Her words hung in the air,
their simplicity cutting deeper than any impassioned plea. The room fell quiet. And though she could tell she hadn't won them all over, she knew she had planted seeds of doubt in their resistance. underscore 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 underscore. Not all moments were so formal. One day, while passing through Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport on her way to another meeting, Camille stopped for a coffee. As she waited, a middle-aged black woman approached her hesitantly. "Ms. Carter," the woman asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to thank you." Camille turned to her, her expression softening. "Thank me?" The woman nodded. "My son, he's 17. Last year, he was pulled aside at a security checkpoint and treated like a criminal for no reason. It broke something in him. But when he saw your testimony on the news, it gave him hope. He said, if she can stand up to them, so can I. You've given him a confidence I thought he'd lost." Camille felt a lump rise in her throat. She reached out, placing a hand on the woman's shoulder. "Thank you for sharing that," she said quietly. "Tell your son his strength is what inspires me." The woman smiled through tears. "You're doing important work. Please don't stop." As the woman walked away, Camille stood still for a moment, the weight of her responsibility settling deeper into her bones. It was encounters like this simple, human moments that reminded her why the fight mattered. Underscore 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 underscore. Momentum continued to build. But so did the resistance. Camille's evenings were often spent reviewing policy drafts, preparing for meetings, or responding to letters of support and criticism. She worked in quiet determination, her silver briefcase a constant presence in her study, a reminder of both the journey that had brought her here and the challenges that lay ahead. One evening, during a dinner with her mentor, Director James Preston, she voiced her frustrations. "Sometimes it feels like we're taking one step forward and two steps back. The opposition is louder than I expected." Preston, ever the strategist, leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Change is never easy, Camille. The louder the opposition, the closer you are to something they fear. Remember that." His words stayed with her. The opposition wasn't a sign of failure, it was evidence that the fight was necessary. Underscore 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 underscore. As the weeks turned into months, Camille watched the Passenger Dignity Act gain traction. The media began to cover it with increasing frequency, and public opinion shifted slowly in its favor. Yet Camille remained grounded. She knew progress was fragile, and the work was far from over. Late one evening, as she sat in her study, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from a young woman who worked for an airline, a stranger who had attended one of Camille's workshops. "Because of you, they're listening," the message read. "Thank you for giving us hope." Camille set her phone down and looked out the window at the quiet streets below. The fight was far from finished. But moments like this reminded her that it was worth it. Change might come slowly, but it was coming. And Camille Carter was prepared to see it through, step by deliberate step. The vote on the Passenger Dignity Act had come down to the wire. Camille Carter sat in the gallery of the House of Representatives, her composure steady despite the tension in the air. Around her, the low murmur of conversation swirled as lawmakers took their seats, their movements deliberate, their faces unreadable. She watched without outward emotion, though her heart thrummed faintly with anticipation. The roll call began, each name followed by the affirmation or rejection of the bill. Camille sat still, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the screen tallying the votes. With each eye a flicker of hope, with each nay a reminder of the uphill battle they had fought. The final tally appeared, bright and undeniable: 217 for, 214 against. The Passenger Dignity Act had passed. For a moment, there was silence in the gallery, as though the weight of the decision needed time to settle. Then, applause broke out. Quiet at first but building steadily until the room seemed to hum with the energy of vindication. Camille remained seated, her face calm, though a faint smile curved at the corners of her lips. This wasn't her victory alone, it belonged to everyone who had dared to hope for change. Underscore 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 underscore. Later that day, Camille stood outside the Capitol, the crisp autumn air carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves. Senator Michael Hargrave approached her, his broad smile reflecting the pride she herself felt but wouldn't fully express. "You did it," Hargrave said, clapping her on the shoulder. "No," Camille replied softly. "We did it." The senator nodded, his expression growing serious. "This is just the beginning. You know, passing the bill is one thing, ensuring it's implemented effectively is another." "I know," Camille said, her voice steady. "And I'm ready." Underscore 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 underscore. The weeks following the bill's passage were a blur of activity. Camille was invited to join the newly established Civil Aviation Equity Commission, tasked with overseeing the implementation of the act. The work was rigorous meetings with airline executives, workshops with flight crews, and consultations on creating accountability measures. Each day brought new challenges, but Camille approached them with the same quiet determination that had carried her through the hearing. At one such workshop held at the headquarters of Global Wings Airlines, Camille observed a training session on implicit bias. The room was filled with flight attendants, pilots, and ground staff, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. The trainer, a seasoned diversity expert, guided them through scenarios designed to challenge their assumptions and provoke honest reflection. Camille stood at the back, watching the participants as they grappled with the material. It was slow. Uncomfortable work, change always was. But there were moments, fleeting but significant, when she saw understanding flicker across a face or heard a question that signaled a shift in perspective. These moments, small as they were, reassured her that the effort was worthwhile. underscore 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 underscore.
After the session ended, Camille lingered in the corridor outside the training room. She was approached by Diane Myers, the flight attendant who had reported her on the flight from Toronto to Washington. Diane's steps were hesitant, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression a mixture of shame and determination. "Ms. Carter," Diane began, her voice quiet. I owe you an apology." Camille turned to face her fully, her expression unreadable but not unkind. "Go on," she said simply. Diane took a deep breath. "I made assumptions about you, about your briefcase, about who you were. I let those assumptions cloud my judgment. And I'm so sorry for what I put you through." Camille studied her for a long moment, her silence heavier than any words. Finally, she spoke, her tone even. "Acknowledging your mistake is a start. What matters now is what you do going forward." Diane nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I won't let it happen again."
Underscore 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 underscore. As Camille prepared to leave the Global Wings headquarters that evening, she paused at the entrance to take in her surroundings. The building, sleek and modern, had once felt imposing. Now, it felt like a symbol of what was possible. Change, she realized, wasn't about sweeping gestures or grand declarations. It was about small, deliberate steps, each one building on the last. Her phone buzzed with a message as she stepped into the brisk evening air. It was from a young woman who had attended one of her workshops. "Because of you, they're listening. Thank you for giving us hope." Camille smiled faintly, her breath forming soft clouds in the cold air. These moments, quiet, personal, and deeply human, were what sustained her. They were reminders that her work, though slow and often exhausting, was making a difference. Underscore 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 underscore. That night, back in her townhouse, Camille sat at her desk, her silver briefcase open before her. The Medal of Freedom gleamed under the desk lamp, a testament to her past achievements. But her focus wasn't on the medal, it was on the future. She thought of the passengers who would one day board flights without fear of being judged unfairly. She thought of the airline staff who would learn to question their biases and treat every traveler with dignity. And she thought of the countless individuals whose quiet acts of courage had paved the way for moments like this. The fight for justice was far from over. But tonight, Camille allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. The world was changing, not quickly, not easily, but it was changing. And she was proud to be part of that change. Months had passed since the Passenger Dignity Act became law. Camille Carter's days were no less full. But they carried a different weight now, less of anticipation, more of resolve. The Civil Aviation Equity Commission was up and running. And while the work was slow, Camille saw glimmers of progress. Each meeting, each workshop, each small victory built toward something larger.
something more enduring.
The morning was crisp and quiet as Camille walked through the halls of an airline conference in New York City. The event was billed as a gathering of industry leaders, civil rights advocates, and government officials, all focused on the future of equitable air travel. Behind her, a banner stretched across the stage, reading, "Equity in Flight, Building Trust." Together, Camille took her place at the lectern, a modest stack of notes in her hands. The room was filled with attentive faces, a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and cautious optimism. She had spoken to rooms like this before, but each time carried a unique gravity. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and calm. "When we board a plane, we entrust a great deal to the airline carrying us, not just our safety, but our dignity. And yet, for far too many, that trust has been broken." Her words were measured, carrying no anger but an undeniable force. She spoke of her own experience, weaving it with stories shared by others since her testimony. She recounted moments of bias that were often dismissed as misunderstandings but, when viewed together, painted a clear and troubling picture. "This is not a burden," she said, glancing at the airline executives seated in the front row. "It is an opportunity. An opportunity to lead. To create an industry that doesn't just move people from one place to another but moves us closer to equity, respect, and understanding." The room was quiet as Camille stepped back from the lectern. The applause came slowly at first, then built into a steady wave of acknowledgement. It wasn't unanimous, but it didn't need to be. Change rarely began with unanimity. Underscore 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 underscore. Later that day, Camille visited the Commission's office in Washington. The walls were lined with maps, reports, and photographs from workshops across the country. A small but growing team of advocates and researchers worked tirelessly to ensure the law was more than just words on paper. As Camille walked the halls, she paused to greet staff members, her presence a quiet but steady source of encouragement. One young analyst approached her, clutching a folder of data. "Ms. Carter," he said, his voice eager but slightly nervous, "we've been tracking incident reports since the Act was implemented. There's a noticeable decline in complaints of bias during flights. It's early, but the trend is promising." Camille studied the charts he handed her, her expression thoughtful. "It's a start," she said, her tone encouraging. "But we can't let up. Progress has a way of slipping through the cracks if we're not vigilant." The young man nodded, his determination evident. "Understood." Underscore 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 underscore. That evening, Camille returned to Global Wings Airlines for a surprise inspection. The visit marked a critical moment in the Commission's oversight efforts, and Camille was keen to see if the promises made months earlier had been upheld. She moved through the facility with quiet observation, noting changes both small and significant. The most striking moment came when she encountered Diane Myers again. The flight attendant had requested to speak with her personally, and the two sat in a modest break room, its hum of vending machines the only sound between them. Diane's hands fidgeted in her lap as she began. "Ms. Carter,
I've thought about our flight every day since it happened. It's not easy to admit. But I was wrong about you. About the assumptions I made. The training we've received since then, it's opened my eyes in ways I didn't expect. Camille listened quietly. Her expression calm but attentive. When Diane finished, Camille spoke with her characteristic steadiness. What matters is what you've done since that day. Acknowledging the mistake is important. But the real work is in the change that follows. Diane nodded. Her eyes bright with emotion. I'm trying. I truly am. Camille offered a small, encouraging smile. That's all any of us can do.
Underscore 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 underscore.
Later that night, Camille boarded her own flight back to Washington. She took her seat near the window. The city lights below fading as the plane ascended. Her silver briefcase sat securely in the overhead compartment. A quiet reminder of how far she'd come and how far there was still to go. As the hum of the engine steadied, Camille allowed herself a moment to reflect. The fight against bias wasn't about grand, sweeping victories, it was about the subtle shifts in perspective. The quiet moments of understanding that paved the way for lasting change. It was in the young analyst's determination. In Diane's apology. In the message from a stranger saying, "Because of you, they're listening." Camille closed her eyes. The steady rhythm of the flight lulling her into a rare moment of peace. She knew there would be new challenges ahead. New battles to fight. But she also knew she wasn't fighting alone. For every moment of resistance, there was a moment of progress, a reminder that the work she did mattered. For Camille Carter, the journey was never just about her. It was about everyone who had been silenced, judged, or dismissed. It was about the world they all deserved, a world where trust, dignity, and respect weren't privileges but rights. As the plane soared through the night sky, Camille rested, knowing that tomorrow would bring more work. And she would be ready. Always ready.